All right, we are live. Welcome to a UFC 279 Creating Alpha show. My name is Brett Apley. I'm joined today by two very special guests, Mr. Sun Tzu and Technical Tim. Here mostly to talk about the changes in the main card fights with the cancellation of Chimaev and Nate Diaz in the main event. Let me just tweet again that we are live real quick, because I know this is pretty spur of the moment here. We are live, and I was going to make this a premium show, but I just figured there's a lot of people who are very interested in this, especially with, we're going to get new odds on these fights, but DraftKings won't change their salaries. So just as an example, Tony Ferguson 7.2K, Diaz 6.6K, two of the cheapest fighters on the slate. That changes the slate dramatically. So we're going to give our basic matchup analysis and the DraftKings implications of it. If you guys have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. Not sure how much we'll get to, but just really want to focus on the new matchups today. But Joe, I'll bring you in. It's been a little while, man. How's everything?
It's been okay. I've been on a bit of a slump from a DFS perspective. I was hoping to right to ship this card. Now I'm going to have to rethink my entire strategy. I do think that the fights are actually better. Obviously it creates more work. Like, I generally don't do most of my builds to Saturday anyway, so it's not like I have to go like adjust 100 lineups or anything. It's more like I probably have like 5 or 7 hand builds that I've done that I might have to adjust. But for what happened, I actually have to say I'm not that disappointed. I think from a competitive perspective, these are better fights.
Yeah, I don't think that's really a hot take too, because most of the opinions that I've seen, it's like main event was canceled. Let's go! Like Nate Tony is so much better, and now Chimaev Holland has some backing too with what happened yesterday at the ceremonial weigh-ins. What's going on, Tim? How are you? And what do you think of all this craziness?
Yeah, it's just craziness. It's whatever, it's funny how just one guy missing weight can change 3 fights, right?
Yeah.
And they're kind of lucky, like, because you could have easily not had people and where you could have matched them all back up, right? And this kind of worked out perfectly, I would say. It didn't work out perfectly, but given the circumstances, it kind of worked out for him.
Yeah. No, definitely. I think it's probably going to potentially bring in more views than it would have with the original scheduled matchups. Let's talk about the main event here. It is now, and this is all unofficial, but
we'll act as if these are happening.
We'll act as if it's happening, and we'll kind of give, because I'm still not totally certain whether it's 3 rounds versus 5 rounds. That does make an impact. The main event is now unofficially Nate Diaz versus Tony Ferguson. My assumption is 5 rounds. 3 rounds obviously impacts the slate if that's what ends up happening, but we're kind of going to proceed as if it's 5 rounds. And my initial thoughts on the matchup were just kind of like, this is probably going to be a close fight. Both guys kind of, I think 5 rounds works to their favor. There's kind of the narrative with Tony Ferguson being old, coming off a knockout loss, durability is a question mark. But Diaz is at the tail end of his career too, obviously, and reaction times aren't all there. So from a general macro perspective, I just kind of think these guys are probably going to stand and trade for 25 minutes. It could be a super high-paced matchup. I guess I'll start with you, Joe. What are your initial thoughts on this matchup? Do you have a favorite?
Yeah, look, I actually liked Tony a bit. In his original fight against Jingaling, I thought he was live in that fight. I thought he had a shot. I think this makes for a more compelling fight from a Legends perspective. And as a fan, I'm very interested in watching this fight. These are 2 guys that are going to bang. It will be interesting to determine whether it's going to be 25 minutes or 15 minutes. And I think because Tony is a cardio freak and he probably trains the same way anyway, as if it would be a 25-minute fight, I don't think it's going to give Diaz any distinct advantage from a cardio perspective. But I mean, these guys are going to bang. I'd be shocked if the fight went the distance anyway. I just think these guys are gonna hit each other. And I actually still like Tony. I know it's a different opponent. You could give the odds. I think he's a slight favorite over Diaz. What, minus 150, I believe?
Well, it's interesting because Diaz opened at minus 150 or so, minus 155. It's kind of bounced up and down. I now see Tony Ferguson sitting at minus 130. So relatively close to pick 'em.
I think it's close. Look, I mean, we were talking about this offline, Brett. If this was DraftKings pricing, it would probably be 8,200, 8,000, very close to that. So and now you've got 7,200 and what, 6,600, 6,700. So, lineup builds are going to be really, really interesting.
Yeah, and I want to circle back to DraftKings in a second. Tim, I'm curious what your analysis, just general analysis of the fight is. I noticed Joe mentioned that he doesn't think this fight's going 25 minutes, but like historically, these are among two of the most durable fighters in the sport. So really, I wouldn't be surprised if this fight lasted 25 minutes.
Yeah, I kind of lean it going a while. I guess like the reason it wouldn't is if one just shows up really shot, like Donald Cerrone. I mean, Cerrone was even getting finished in his prime, but you know what I mean? Like they could just show up more shot. Like Cerrone wasn't getting finished in his prime against guys like Jim Miller, and we kind of saw shit like that happen later. But I would kind of favor it to go. Maybe not all 5 rounds, but I think it will play out for a while. I think it's competitive. Like I texted you right away. It's a close fight, in my opinion. I really don't have strong opinions. I kind of feel like Tony might have the advantage of just like the optics where Diaz, like I hate how Diaz just bleeds all over. And I know that's kind of like, I'm usually a metric guy, but the metrics are close. And I feel like optics can matter in a striking fight, like when you're trying to judge rounds. And I feel like Nate bleeds every fight, and it's just always a bad look. And I do feel like he also reacts poor. Like he can get hit and not dropped, but he like reacts badly. Like it looks like it affects him and stuff. So I kind of lean Ferguson maybe slightly because of just little things like that, but it's really hard to be confident in a high variance I think it's going to be 5 rounds striking fight with 2 guys who are past their prime. But I think they'll both land a lot. Like, I think they're both going to land a lot.
Do you think either fighter has any real chance to have offensive grappling success? Because obviously they're both black belts in jiu-jitsu, both dangerous in that sense, but neither really that strong of a wrestler.
I lean towards no, just because neither of them land that many takedowns. So like they won't even probably be attempting that many. Like Nate attempts a few per fight, and I think Tony's even less than that. So like I'm gonna say no, and they're just not the best control guys. But I do think both guys are. There's like what I call a spot takedown fight, where like either guy can land takedowns because both of them are bad defensively. Like they both defend takedowns pretty poorly. And especially Ferguson now. Like, what's Ferguson's TDD? Like 65? I'm looking it up. Sorry.
That's okay.
It's 66, and it's like way worse as he's gotten older. And Nate's is 41. So like either guy can land a takedown just on the other guy being poor defensively. But I think they'll duke it out for the most part.
And last question I wanted to ask you about this matchup. Like, let's say it does go 25 minutes. We would project both fighters to land strikes at a high pace, but I think like honing in on exactly how high of a pace matters, because we'll touch on DraftKings in a second. Like I've had like 15 people already tell me that they're going to stack this fight in all formats. They're going to land millions of strikes. And so like they're going to land a lot of strikes, but the difference between landing 120 strikes over 25 minutes and landing 200 significant strikes over 25 minutes could be the difference between being optimal and not. So like I know it's an impossible question to answer, but like if I forced you to give a ballpark estimate of significant strikes landed for each side, like kind of where do you see that range falling?
Over 100. Like, and I know that kind of sounds like a big projection, but
I think that's potentially low. In 25 minutes, I would say like,
yeah, like,
do you think closer to 100 or 200?
I mean, if I was to set an over under, it would probably be like around like 115-ish, and like it could be like Nate Diaz can land, like Tony Ferguson and Justin Gaethje, just to give like a comp, was 143 and 136 in the 5th round with a couple minutes left. And then if you look at Tony Ferguson and Michael Chandler, it only stayed standing for literally 2.5 minutes because, whatever. And they landed 18 and 17 distance strikes each. So like, and Nate just gets landed on a lot. I think they're both going to land a shitload. And it's just going to be a matter of if someone's chin holds up. And I don't think grappling will come into play as much. So like what would you project? I'm trying to think, like 115,
maybe like in the 140s.
Probably, yeah. Like it's still hard for me to project that because I do think every now and then a finish will happen, which torches that number. So I would maybe go, yeah.
It's just because it's like the perfect pairing of guys who do not give a fuck about getting landed on,
Yeah. I always hate going for like a really, really high number just because like finishes happen. So I'll usually decrease it a little bit, but yeah, still.
Well, I kind of meant like under the assumption it goes 25 minutes.
Oh, yeah. It could hit like 140, like easily, I think. It'll be a lot. But
Joe, so the odds currently Ferguson minus 130, Diaz plus 102. It could flip. It could remain. It's going to remain relatively competitive, I think. I think whichever side's the underdog, people may try and put some action on. But at this point, I'm feeling like Ferguson will end up as a slight favorite. On DraftKings, Ferguson 7,200. Diaz is 6,600. What's your just kind of initial reaction based on 5-round potential? Ferguson slight favorite. It's such cheap prices. What are you looking to do?
I don't always stack, but I think this is a pretty obvious stack in cash if it's a 5-round fight. I'm less certain about stacking if it's a 3-round fight, but a 5-round fight, you want to stack it because you're going in at 13.9. You're going in at 13.9. That just leaves so much salary left. But, I do think that that's going to be pretty common in cash in particular.
I think it's like almost I don't really see why. Well, I'd have to play around with it because Rodriguez is also someone we'll talk about. But yeah, that I guess I'm less concerned about cash games just because it's too obvious. Yeah. Both guys are going to rate out among the best on the slate in tournaments. Kind of what is your initial reaction?
Well, look, I think you want to have a lot of exposure to this fight because of the salary, right? So you want to have exposure to both sides. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it's the highest owned fight.
It will be
in combination on the slate, right? Because however you see it, like if you see it as 8,000, right? Then what do you want to do? Do you want to go 55-45? One way or the other, and have 100% exposure to the fight, or I generally don't have 100% exposure to any fight. So maybe you go 90% exposure and then kind of split your exposure up that way, go 50-40. But I do think that just based on the aggregate salary, and anytime we get anything under 16.2, you want to go all in. So if tournaments are going to be really interesting, it opens up a lot of combinations. I was only going to play 100 lineups. I might play 150 now just to get the extra exposure.
I mean, I'm going to project both guys in the 40 to 50 range just because I think they're going to be nearly 100% owned. And the percentage that they're not 100% owned in a single lineup is going to kind of be replaced by the number of people who are going to play both fighters in tournaments. And that's kind of
way to get leverage on the field then is to not play either.
Well, yes, the way to get leverage on the field is to not play either one of them. And it's like it could work out if probably if Ferguson wins a decision, and then there's like 3 or 4 other underdogs that win inside the distance. It's possible. Yep. It's just not really. Obviously, the recommended route would be to have exposure to one or the other in the majority of your lineup. I just don't think stacking is that intelligent of a move. Like, in part, like, I know people want to do it because you're guaranteeing yourself a winner at a low salary. If they both stand and trade for 25 minutes, you're getting a lot of points either way. But like, you're still guaranteeing yourself a loss. And
right.
Striking just doesn't score as well as it used to. Like, if I pull up my handy dandy calculator, 140 significant strikes would be around 56 points in a loss on DraftKings. And like, yes, if Nate Diaz scores 56 points in a loss, that could be optimal. But like, you also have to factor, like, why would people be stacking that fight? They would be stacking that fight.
With the scoring change, Brad, it's much less likely to have, once the scoring change, once they stopped giving, the way they scored significant strikes, 2 for a point, once they went away from that metric, it's much harder, I think, especially when you have strikers going in.
And the other factor is, like, you're saving so much salary so that you can pay up for both Chimaev and Almeida and Kudalaba, which is just so even if like the stack ends up optimal, it's very, very likely that you're going to be duped to infinity on the same combination. So like, if you want to stack and play Johnny Walker with it and play Collier and Norman Dumont, like, that's the type of lineup that is going to be more plus.
You got to leave salary on the table. That's the only way you're going to be unique if you stack that fight.
And I think it's preferred to go one or the other rather than both in tournaments. Try and push for 6 wins, especially since you also have Daniel Rodriguez, who's a favorite below the mid range. There are definite paths to 6 wins.
Also, it's a larger contest this week because it's a pay-per-view. So there's more entries than you would normally see in this main. We're talking about the main contest, right? The $25 contest, $200K on top. There's more entries than you would typically see. So, yeah, I mean, I think you're going to need 6 wins to get optimal.
Okay.
Just so you know, the ITD lines are coming out.
What are they?
I mean, I don't see it for the Nate fight yet, but Holland and Chimaev came out. It's the over under 1.5 is -155. Sorry, I know it's a different fight, but I was just mentioning it because it's all breaking news, right? And then
no, it's okay. I see
D-Rod
up to
and
-146.
over 2.5 -155. I agree with both.
Okay. I think we can move on to the next. And real quick, if that fight is only scheduled for 3 rounds, I do still think it's a very valuable fight to target. But it's just there's just going to be a much smaller chance that the winner's optimal. So if that happens, we'll readdress it. And by the way, I'm going to update the beatdown. I'm gonna post kind of a written summary of everything we're talking about here in premium. I'm going to update projections and ownership after we get off the show. So in case you're wondering about that, our co-main event, I guess, is now Khamzat Chimaev versus Kevin Holland. Chimaev is -455-ish, -400, Holland +300. Chimaev opened at like -1,000 and has been bet down since. The weight, I guess, Tim, I'm guessing that your opinion on his weight miss is just kind of to not factor it.
Yeah, because I mean, you don't know how it can like really impact. I mean, there's times when people just dominate on the weight miss, and sometimes they look a little worse. So it's like I'm just gonna assume Chimaev is Chimaev, and I feel like it's more likely that happens than him just looking like a shell of himself. I just feel like that's usually how it goes. And same with, like, I know it's another, but a few people miss weight, and I'm just gonna assume they kind of look like an average version of themselves. So that's kind of what I think.
Joe, do you care about Chimaev missing by 7.5 pounds, and kind of how dominant of a favorite do you think he should be against Kevin Holland?
Look, I said it before, and I'll say it again. I would rather have a guy miss by that much than miss by a quarter a pound or a half a pound, because at some point, and I don't know when that point might have been, he just decided to stop cutting because he didn't think he was going to make it. So I'd like to think that he did that well before endangering himself, trying to make the cut. So I would always rather have someone miss big. If you're going to miss big. I don't think it's going to impair him at all. I think he'll look the same as he would look. I guess my question to you, Brett, is this going to be a 5-round fight as well?
No.
Oh,
No.
so Brett, there was someone in the comments, shout out to someone in the comments who said it might, apparently Howland is saying he'll only do it in 5 rounds. I don't know if that's actually, so I don't know. I'm going to assume it's going to be 3. I doubt they make it 5, but.
That's interesting.
But have you, I'm trying to look, because a lot of.
I don't honestly know that it matters, because I couldn't see it going that long anyway, but it would be interesting.
I mean, I think it does matter.
I think it could, but Chimaev could. Holland can I feel like Holland can negate getting submitted. He actually has a guard and whatnot. Chimaev could finish him on the floor, but I do think he could extend the fight too. There are worlds where that happens.
Yes. Ryan saying.
I don't think you read the line. It's Chimaev is minus 450.
Yeah. Ryan in the comments saying he's not accepting unless it's a main event in 5 rounds. Well, then it's not going to happen because they're not making that the main event. So this is all unofficial talk. I do think the fight's probably going to happen. I do think it's probably going to be 3 rounds, despite what Kevin Holland says. But the matchup as a whole, basically, Tim, I see Chimaev having a very easy path to top position.
Yeah.
And maybe less of an opportunity to finish Holland on the ground, but he probably can take Kevin Holland down whenever he wants to, and he probably can hold him down for 3 to 5 minutes per round and land a bunch of ground strikes and threaten for submission. How realistic is Kevin Holland winning that fight for you in 3 versus 5?
If I will say, just the fact that I could maybe see him surviving and extend. So maybe he could make something happen late if Chimaev starts to get tired. But I still Chimaev is the rightful favorite. Let's be real. Brendan Allen and people have Brunson out wrestled him. If it's 3 rounds, Chimaev can do that for steal a couple rounds and maybe threaten first. I do think Howland will survive for a bit though. I think if he gets finished, it might be eventually, but I don't think he's not John Phillips and some of these other guys. That's all I'm saying. I do think if Chimaev falls in love with his striking too much, Holland's a better striker in my opinion. Some people seem to think Chimaev is an amazing striker, but if Gilbert Burns lands over 100 significant strikes in 3 rounds when he's never landed close to that, you're flawed defensively, and Holland's a better striker. Chimaev could land a bomb and knock him out. Chimaev has legitimate power. I'm willing to concede that. And I think he's good offensively as a striker, but Holland's better defensively. And if he falls in love with it, Holland's a sharper striker, and I would favor him on the feet. I think you guys probably would favor Holland on the feet too.
Yeah, I think it would be competitive. But yeah, I made the same comments about Gilbert Burns, who's a career low volume inefficient striker. And he fights Chimaev, and it's he lands at a 60% clip over 15 minutes, and lands 120 significant strikes and hurt Chimaev a couple of times. I don't know how you can watch that fight and think anything other than Chimaev's got some work to do defensively. But Holland's not a great defensive striker either. He doesn't make good decisions. He's offensively dangerous, and so it gives him a path to land on Chimaev and hurt Chimaev. But I also think Chimaev could have success too, could land on him.
Yeah.
And then if you factor in the wrestling, obviously that's gonna favor Chimaev. But like in pure striking exchanges, yeah, definitely Holland would be live there. Joe, you like at 9.6K. Chimaev was by far my favorite play on the slate. 5 rounds against Diaz. I thought he was going to score 1,000,000 points. Now it's a real conversation between him and Almeida and other fighters. I still think Chimaev has a high floor, a very high ceiling, but it's not as one-sided between him and the rest of the slate. So kind of what would your new opinion be? Assume if it's 5 rounds, Chimaev's still going to be a far better option. Assuming it's 3 rounds.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually looking at it the other way. I was thinking like what the hell type of ownership is Kevin Holland going to get at his price point? Being as expensive as he is. But to answer your question,
we'll go to that next.
Yeah, but to answer your question, look, I don't think he's the best play on the slate anymore. I mean, just if you just look at odds, right? He went from what was he, minus 2,000 to minus 450.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're an odds chaser and you're trying to correlate that, I mean, look, I think Almeida, perhaps Collier, which is close now. I think Collier's minus 410 is going to be pretty close in terms of, I think Collier is more likely to get a quick finish over Barnett than Kazmat is over Holland. So I think, you can definitely, I don't know if that opinion's universal though. So I definitely think you could get some leverage on the field by diversifying away from Chimaev and on to some of those. I mean, even Norma Dumont, like if she immediately gets, her opponent down, and could win pretty quickly that way too. There's a lot of different ways to go. So I would tend to agree with you that there's at least a conversation that, there are better plays at lower price points in the upper range.
Yeah, I obviously will do projections after this show's over. I would still have Chimaev projected to be owned very highly because of the salaries that have opened up. So even though he's now only minus 450 versus being minus 1,500, he's just incredibly easy to afford, and he's still minus 450 in a good matchup as a grappler who's scored very well throughout his UFC career. So I still think he's a very good play, but I agree, I'd be more willing to pivot away, to leave salary on the table. Tim, I don't know, I assume you got to look through most fights on this card, but Jailton Almeida, Norma Dumont, Collier, Dawadu, do any of those names stand out as fighters who you think could maybe smash their opponents?
Collier, and I just think he's safe. He's got grappling upside. He has finishing upside. He's got high strike upside. Who were the other ones you said?
I mentioned Norma
Dumont.
Dumont and Jailton Almeida.
And then I mean Almeida, but I feel I'm more worried. Even though the odds I don't think reflected, I'm more worried about him losing than Collier.
That's what I was talking to you about yesterday.
Yeah, just because if Almeida gets an extended fight, he could be in trouble. Where Collier can win an extended fight, fine. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think Collier is more likely to win his fight based on what I know, because I know what we're getting between those fighters. Where Almeida is a storm grappler early, and I don't know what he's going to look like. What we saw. Who was it recently who just lost after he didn't get there? I picked against him. What?
Yeah. I said Romanov.
We saw what happens when he doesn't immediately finish someone, and I picked Taborov, but I knew what I was getting from Taborov, where I don't know as much here what's going to happen. But and then I don't know, what was the other fight you said? Dumont.
Yeah,
I'm worried she doesn't go to grappling, and it kind of just becomes a competitive striking fight. So
I also think Dawodu's really, really sneaky. I mean, he missed weight. He didn't look great on the scale. That's a little bit of a concern. I think Arosa, I think a lot of people like Arosa anyway, but man, it just, if you look through Arosa's fights and his game logs, like it's kind of funny because we know that he can be, and not only that, Tim, in his last 4 wins, he's earned 1 knockdown and he's been knocked down twice.
Yeah,
he's been knocked down in 2 of his last 4 victories. So it's like Dawadu by KO seems like a very reasonable outcome here.
I like Dawadu here way more than other people. Like, I think he should be a heavier favorite. And like, anytime I tell anyone that, they're like, I don't know, he's kind of pricey. But then those same people are playing Romanov at -500, and it's like, like, the reason I like him is just I think he's so much more likely to win if it goes the distance than Arosa, because the metrics, and like, this guy gave Evloev like a really tough fight. Like, I think he can anti-grapple enough to where if it goes to decision, he has superior striking metrics. And I legitimately think I know he's not a finisher, but I think he's more likely to win inside the distance here than Arosa. So
I think he's a better bet than he is a DraftKings play, personally.
Yeah, probably. I haven't really thought as much as DraftKings, but I think he's live for a knockout more than people think here, because I know he like doesn't get a ton, but the durability of Arosa is terrible. And Dawadu was hurting like guys like Trezana. Like, I think he could knock Arosa out. I really do. And if he lands 100 significant strikes, and like, look at Arosa, he absorbed over 100 significant strikes against Peterson. Like, he did not look good in that fight. Like, that was another fight where he looked a lot worse in that fight than I thought he was going to. And I think Dawadu's live for a knockout, much more than people think, like, big time. And I just like him to win. So I don't know. But for DraftKings, I'm not an expert there. I'm just talking like from a matchup perspective.
For DraftKings, he would need the knockout.
Yeah,
and obviously that. But like he's not going to be that highly owned. Is the thing. So it's like, it's not as if you're playing a guy who's 60%. He's probably going to be like, I think I have him around like 18% off to redo projections, but he's not going to be highly owned. And like, that is one of the reasons why I like maybe taking some risks on him in that range, because I do think a knockout, albeit is not the most likely outcome in the world compared to other fighters on the slate, I think it's very, very reasonable. And Arosa's been KO'd so many times. I mean, it's just.
I mean, Trezano was his only 100-point performance in the UFC. I mean,
it's more about Arosa's
2 grapplers like Evloev, who Arosa's not as much of a control threat to where they can like control him. I feel like Arosa's more of like a transitional choke threat, you know?
Well, and it's also just if he gets a striking based fight,
yeah, which he should.
Arosa has a history of getting knocked down, and so it's like, will it happen for sure? Who knows? But I think it's at least an outcome worth considering. Let's talk about the third new fight, which again is unofficial, but it's going to be Daniel Rodriguez versus Li Jingliang, and Rodriguez is getting bet down a little bit. He opened at like -150. I now see it closer to -140. Joe, do you have a initial take on Rodriguez versus Jingliang for like a matchup standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I liked Rodriguez against Holland a bit. I mean, I liked his output. I liked him at 7.5K. Now he's 7.5K and a favorite, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, his ownership is going to go through the roof for that reason, which kind of makes me like him a little bit less just from a pure ownership perspective, because, you know, at 7.5K, you're getting a -160 fighter. I don't know that he should be that big a favorite. I kind of look at it as a pick'em fight personally. I'm curious to hear what Tim has to say. He's better at the analytics than I am, but like, I see this as more of a pick'em. I mean, I think it'll be a very competitive fight, and would not in the least be surprised if Jingliang wins, this fight. So, I want to have exposure to Rodriguez because of his price at 7.5K, but, I probably will play Jingling here more than I would have played him against Ferguson.
I mean, that's going to be a hot take, and we didn't
That
really
is a
touch
hot
on
take.
we didn't really touch on Kevin Holland, who's 8.7K. Jing Liang's 9K, so Jing Liang would need an early knockout to have. He'll be very low owned, but he would need an early knockout to have any
Yes.
shot at the optimal lineup here. Tim, I assume you feel the line should be relatively close, but do you even lean one way or the other, and kind of what's your general analysis?
I just think it's a really close fight. Like, their metrics are like pretty similar from a ratio perspective. D-Rod kind of tends to land more output in general, but he also gets hit, you know? Like, I think it's going to be close. From a durability perspective, like, I might maybe, like, I know Leach's never been knocked out, but maybe I lean D-Rod at, like, being a little more durable. Just because, like, I mean, he was hurt by Dwight Grant, but Leach has been hurt a lot, even though he hasn't been sent it, like a lot. But that's really hard for me to call. Like, he also hits pretty hard. Like, I've even before his last fight, I always said I thought he had underrated powers. So it's a pretty competitive striking fight, in my opinion. I think I understand why, like, there's a slight lean on D-Rod, and he's like minus 140. Fine. Like, gun to my head, I would maybe go with D-Rod, but it's close. Like, I think it's a really close fight.
Yeah, I think it's a close fight too. Obviously, I like the output of Rodriguez, but Jing Liang's very dangerous, and I think I feel like what's the over under here?
It's over 2.5 minus 150. I tend to lean it going the distance, but like someone just might clip the other.
I don't know. I definitely wouldn't be confident this fight goes the distance because they both land pretty hard, and they both could be hurt. Like, from a DraftKings perspective, it's hard. Like, Rodriguez is 7.5K. He'll be the most popular fighter, you know, besides Ferguson and Diaz, I would think, because he's a favorite, or he could even be more popular than those guys. I would still prefer the winner of Diaz or Ferguson over Rodriguez in a win, just because those two have an extra 2 rounds to work with. And they could win inside the distance as well. Like, Rodriguez in a striking-based decision, I don't know that he pays off. I mean, he's going to score well enough for the price, but if he gets beaten out by the winner of Diaz and Ferguson, it's just a much smaller chance that he's needed for the optimal lineup, and he's obviously going to be highly owned, so you're going to be in more combinations that are going to be duplicated. It's really tough. So, Joe, you said you kind of like taking chances on Jing Liang as a contrarian option at 9K?
As a contrarian option. I mean, look, Rodriguez has gotten 10x in pretty much every one of his wins based on his salary. I think he maybe barely missed it in one fight against Perry. But, you know, so if you're looking for 10x, I'm pretty sure you're going to get 10x at 7.5K. Whether that equates to being optimal or not, I'd like to think he would score higher than that, because I do think it's going to be, you know, a kind of a phone booth type of fight, you know, standing, a lot of striking. You know, look, it's hard to get away from 7.5K at minus 160, but I think as a pure contrarian option, you know, with knockout upside, I think you got to take some shots on, you know, Jingling.
Do you know who just became the best, or not the best? Do you know who just became the arguably the most valuable underdog on the slate? I think it's actually Johnny Walker, who's 7.6K, who is going to now be much lower owned.
Oh, yeah.
Than he was when Rodriguez was an underdog against Holland. Because, and it's not like I like Johnny Walker at all, but if Johnny Walker wins, I think it's pretty likely it comes in the form of an early knockout, and it's at low ownership. So even if Rodriguez wins, you know, you can maybe gain leverage on that play, and just he has a better chance to. He has a higher ceiling than Rodriguez, I think. People are going to have an easier time to pay up for Kudalaba now, even more so. Tim, like, do you think in the Cutelaba versus Walker matchup, do you think Walker has a realistic chance to win the fight, basically?
Yeah. Just because I still think he's like dangerous and whatnot. And Cutelaba isn't like the best defensive striker, and his chin's a little scary. So like Walker landing a stupid knee like he did versus Serkinov, like something could happen, you know. I still like Cutelaba is not safe, but I do agree he should probably be the favorite just on like takedown and grappling upside. That's kind of like how I read the fight. But like from a betting perspective, I want nothing to do with that fight, to be real. But like I do think Walker could get a win. I also think he like has a guard enough to like we've seen it before where he's kind of been on the mat. I think it was against Krylov to where he can survive and perhaps extend the fight, you know. So that just gives him more opportunities for like to not get finished on the mat and eventually get a knockout. But they're both live to kill each other on the feet, either of them, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think Cutelaba is deserving of being the favorite. It's one thing that's interesting is I like Walker is so much bigger than Cutelaba. Like he's 6'6". Cutelaba is 6'1", 82-inch reach, 75-inch reach. It's not going to matter like over the long run, but I do think Walker will have some opportunities early on, and Cutelaba doesn't make good decisions. Cutelaba was knocked out by Ankalaev. I don't think a KO is that crazy. And if Walker's just not going to be owned anymore because Daniel Rodriguez is a slight favorite, I really like taking chances on Walker for the upside and for the leverage. Do you have anything to add in this matchup, Joe?
No, I think we covered it.
Okay. Anything else? You want to talk about, or Tim?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, Tim, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say Ariel Helwani just tweeted out, "This is what the UFC wants," and he said the 3 matchups we think are going to happen at the top of the card. But then he goes, Dustin Poirier tells me he was called in and accepted, weighs around 176, had a pilot and jet on standby. Nothing moved, though. Seems like, at least for now, they want Diaz and Ferguson. And on those, like, 6 guys, he's saying some are in, some aren't. It's very complex right now.
Yeah.
They're just trying to get more money. Like, I would do, if I was their manager, I would be like...
Yeah, Holland should squeeze the UFC for all he can get.
Oh, I would be bad in that negotiating room. Like, I would just be like, I want,
Those guys deserve to get paid. It's funny because one of my sources that I was asking about the Diaz fight, I'm like what are the odds that this Chimaev, like that he stays on and fights Chimaev? And the guy's like fucking 0%. It's Tony Ferguson or they have Dustin Poirier as a backup. This is like 3 hours ago. Yeah. So it's funny. I'll see it play out. I just wasn't sure what was going to happen with Chimaev, but hopefully these fights stay on. And so after we get off, I'm going to post this on the premium side as well. If you guys don't know, we're still running dailyfanmma.com, full DraftKings breakdowns every single week from myself and Tim, full DraftKings analysis, premium podcast there every single week, projections, ownership, rankings, all that good stuff. I'm going to post this on the premium side. Then I'm going to probably look into projections and ownership first, since we have odds. Some odds are out. It's probably going to take a long time to get the round by round odds, but that's what I'm going to go to next. I'm going to try and reproject ownership and points, and then I will post kind of like a written summary of the 3 matchups and DraftKings implications on the beatdown article as well. So if you have any other questions after that, and obviously if things change from now until fight night tomorrow, I'll just continue to keep posting updates in the beatdown on Twitter and Discord as well. So make sure you follow me on Twitter at BrettApley, Make sure you follow Joe on Twitter at SunSu. Follow Tim at Timmy Z. We have the free Discord you can join as well. That's the link to that is on our website, dailyfanmma.com. And thank you guys for watching and for the support. I'll try and do more free shows like this in the future. I know Joe and I haven't been on as much in the last couple months, but creating alpha never dies, guys. So we'll always be popping up now and again. I still have my free articles on the Athletic as well. Have Mayo Media Network. doing the quick picks there every single week besides the premium content. So thank you again. Hope you enjoyed this show. Any final words before we get out of here? No? Good?
Real quick, got the RotoWire pod with DFS Sniper coming off a massive win in Europa Soccer. And the real Chris Olsen, who is recovered from his IBS issues, will be doing the RotoWire pod at 8 p.m. Eastern time tonight. We'll cover some of this that we talked about here. Maybe we'll have some additional clarity in the course of the next 3 hours. So if you guys want to watch that, fine. If not, no issues. That's what I got going on for today.
Cool. Anything else from you, Tim?
No, I'm just excited to see, like, it's gonna be lit in the arena tomorrow now. Like, no matter who like Diaz and Ferguson's gonna be fun. I know they're past their prime, but like the crowd loves both those guys. It's gonna be loud. It'll be fun.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, looking forward to it. So yeah, thank you guys again, and best of luck, and talk to y'all soon.
Peace.
Bye, everybody.
Peace.
Bye.